Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about .NET. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Cedric, thank you for the video. Quick question, what's the most common use for .NET Core in the industry? To build REST APIs or MVC projects with Razor? Well, that's going to be REST APIs, but I think I need to elaborate a little bit on the question so that you can kind of understand what I'm saying here. So the reason why I say REST APIs is because first and foremost, REST, although REST is used for SPAs and things such as React, Vue, Angular, etc., etc. That is how you get the data to the screen, right? But you have to also understand that REST is a bigger concept than what HTML and templating is, where if you're using Razor, well, I hope at the very least, you are using it to render something to a page that a user should be able to see. That's what you're using HTML for. But that is also the only use case. As I was saying, you're using REST for the same sort of thing. You're just sending an SPA with JavaScript and so forth, and then that thing's getting the raw data from the REST API. Now, that is one use case for REST, but it's probably the only use case for HTML. But REST can also be used from system to system. In other words, let's say that you're using OAuth or you're using, well, it doesn't have to be REST for that specific thing. It can be RPC and so forth, of course, as well. But I hope you understand that you're not really going to use Razor for inter-system communication, because well, there will be no point. But when you're using REST, that is very much the case. If you're using third-party APIs, or if you say you're using microservices or something like that, you're very likely going to use some type of REST API to do that. Things that I think one thing I need to touch on as well, I'm being nitpicky here now. You're saying MVC project with Razor, and you have to understand that MVC is a bigger concept than I know that for a beginner it's probably very convenient to think about MVC and using templates like HTML templates and stuff like that as being the same thing. It is not. Strictly, if we're being nitpicky, it's not the same thing. MVC is a bigger concept than something that is tied to using HTML. So the model view controller pattern is actually it's the same pattern, it's just an architecture, if that makes sense to you, that you use for any type of network communication. So the view in, say, when you're using HTML templates and Razor and, well, whatever you might be using, that is going to be the HTML. But if you're using a REST API, well, then the view is actually the JSON. The reason why you can say it might sound weird, but you have to think about it from the perspective of the consumer. The thing that you're getting from the endpoint that you're calling, that is going to be the view representation of whatever you want to send. Because as you can imagine, if you have a REST API, well, the model is going to be the stuff that you have in the database, right? But the thing that you're sending over the wire, that may not necessarily be exactly the model. An example would be, let's say that you have a user model. Well, on the user model in your database, you probably have some information you really don't want to send over to the wire, such as, say, passwords. That's not something you want to send over. So you're going to have to create some type of view representation or some type of transient object, a DTO, a data transfer object or something like that, that takes out the stuff that you want to send about the user and excludes or omits the password, if that makes sense. Therefore, now it's not really your model, it's just a view representation of that model, if that makes sense. I hope this sounds logical to you. So MVC, much bigger thing than just, yeah, you're doing rendering or that you're using HTML templates, therefore you're using MVC. MVC is something that practically every single application uses in some format. Yeah, I think that about covers it actually, because I think that you should also know that it is very easy for you. I think at the very least it should be easy for you to learn the basics about Razor and so forth. You need to know this, guys. I'm not saying that, I mean, there's no discussion that REST is the way the web is moving right now. SPAs are on the rise, and so as I said, REST has a bigger use case than what HTML and templating has, because it's actually used for more things. So it's going in that direction, so that's definitely where you want to put your focus, but you cannot neglect learning about HTML, because it would be really weird for you if you don't even know the basics of how the web works, because even today the vast majority of websites are actually using templates, HTML templates. Even though SPAs are very popular and there's probably going to be quite a few jobs for you, that is how the basics of the web work. And you don't have to be a master of this, but every single developer that I know and work with knows at least what a template is, how you render out a HTML template and send it over the wire. So do the ratio like this: 80% REST APIs, 20% Razor and HTML templates. You just learn how it works. You don't have to be a master, so that you can do some basic stuff and read and understand somebody else's code if they used it, and then move on. So what I want you to take away from this is that REST is for sure the way that everything is moving, and the reason is because we're getting more and more types of clients. It used to be the case that the only client that you had was a physical person who sat at the browser and wanted to see an HTML page. That's where all of this HTML templating comes from. So that's the history. REST and just sending raw data in JSON format. It doesn't have to be JSON format, but for most people that's going to be what you're using. Is something that is on the rise, because now we don't just have users who want to see that data, and they're using SPAs these days, which are providing better experiences. There's also like kinds of devices and other systems that want to take part in that data. So sending that data over a REST API is becoming increasingly more common. So try to just have this ratio. Remember that you need to understand your roots, because you can't just ignore something that is not as popular just because it's not the main thing. You have to know it in order to understand how and when to apply it, and if other people are using it, you need to understand what it's doing. 80% REST APIs, 20% HTML, and so forth. And remember, MVC is not the same thing as using templates. MVC is a pattern, it's an architecture style that practically every application uses, and the V that's the view does not necessarily mean HTML template. There are more things that can be a view than HTML. Have a great day.